All right. In this video, we're going to work through coding problem that says write a class that asks the user to input the height and base of a right triangle as integers. Use a scanner object to get the input from the user. The class should calculate the hypotenuse, perimeter, and area of the triangle. The class should display the results to the user rounded to 2 decimal places and include explanatory text along with the numerical values. Okay, so again, a lot of these basic are not basic, but the programs that we'll do at the very beginning of the class break down into the three parts, right? They follow the pattern of you get some input from the user, you make some calculations, and then you display the results to the user. So input, process, output. All right, and so if you kind of think of that think of this problem as breaking down into those three parts, it's helpful. So first, let's start with the input part. So we need to get some input from the user. They ask us to use the scanner class to do that. So to use the scanner class, we're going to have to import java.util.scanner. And then we are going to create a scanner object. So scanner, and then whatever name you want to give it, and then scanner again, and then system.in, which for us is the keyboard. So this creates a new scanner object, and it is watching the keyboard for input. All right, so again, we're just going to add code a little bit at a time and compile rather than try and dump everything in. That'll force us to focus on a few things at a time. So it looks okay so far, no problems, right? Okay. Next up, we are going to prompt the user, right? Tell the user to type in some information. And let me take my keyboard off the international keyboard. Okay, so we need to ask the user to enter the height of the right triangle. So enter the height of a right triangle. So prompt the user, and then we are going, it says we need to get the height as an integer. So that would be int, and we're going to store that in a variable called height. And then we would use the scanner object in, and since we are getting input as an int, we would do in.nextInt. So that calls the next int method in the scanner object. All right, and that gets input from the user as an int, and then it will store that result in the variable height. And then we just repeat that process for all of the things that we need to get from the user. So enter the base, length of the base. Okay, and so let's check that out. So when we run it, so we are able to type in the values here. If you want to see the values, right, then you can just print them out. Like so, and just make sure that everything is working okay, because otherwise when you don't see anything, it's a little bit hard to know that it's whether or not it's working correctly. Okay, so clicking down here, all right, and you can see it printed out those values down here, 6 and 5 that I entered. All right, and so this part is essentially the input part done. Okay. All right, so next up is the process part. We are going to make some calculations in here. So some things that they want to know, right? It says the class should calculate the hypotenuse, okay? So I'm going to create another variable called hypotenuse, and this one I'm going to make a double, right? Because of the formula for the hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse, right, to do that, we are going to use the Pythagorean theorem, right? And so the hypotenuse, that would be c squared equals a squared plus b squared, right? Where c squared is or c is the hypotenuse, right? So it would be math.sqrt, right? And then a squared, or in this case, right, a and b would be the height and the base. So I'm going to use math.pal to square the height. And then math.pal again to square the base. If you have questions about what the formulas are, then or what the math involved in Coding Lab 3, then just let me know. The formula for the mortgage payment that's in Coding Lab 3 was in Assignment 3 as well. So if you have any questions about that, then just let me know, or the other things it asks you to calculate. So I'll at least explain the math to you, not how to write it in Java. That's something that you have to work on yourself. But if you're confused about how the math goes, what the formulas or calculations should be, then I can explain that to you and just tell you what the formulas are in words. Okay, so there we calculate the hypotenuse. So that's one calculation. Next up is the perimeter. So the perimeter would again be a double, because since we're taking the square root here, right, the hypotenuse is most likely going to come out to be some kind of decimal number, not an int, right? So that's why I've stored it at int type double. The perimeter, right, I just need to add up the lengths, right? So height plus base plus hypotenuse, right? That would be the perimeter of the rectangle. And since hypotenuse is a double, well, so then most likely will perimeter be a double. So that's why I declared it as a double. Okay. All right, and then the area, again, is going to be a double. And that's 1/2 base times height. So 1/2 base times height. There's a number of ways you can do that, but the easiest way is just height times base divided by 2.0. Okay, over here. And that 2.0 is important here, right? If I just put divided by 2, right, because height and base are both int, well, Java also interprets 2 as an int as well. So what happens is if I calculate height times base divided by 2, it's going to chop off the decimal point there. Whereas if I put 2.0, right, Java interprets that now as a double value, and so therefore through a process called automatic type conversion, right, is going to convert the result to a double, and so therefore it will not chop off the decimal points, which we don't want the decimal points chopped off here. We want to try and be as accurate as possible about the area. Okay. All right, let's run that, make sure everything's okay. All right, so everything looks good here. We still will need to check that these calculations are coming out correctly, okay, when we do that. So now we are going to do the output part. This is the process part. I think we've calculated everything out, right? Calculated hypotenuse, perimeter, area, All right, and so now all we need to do is to tell the user about this. Okay. All right, so I am going to print the results out. I'm going to use printf, right? And with printf, you can use have formatted printing. Okay. All right, and so here with printf, you would just type your message out for a right triangle with base, and then here's a blank, %d. %d is the format specifier. That's basically like a blank, right, for printf. It's telling Java, hey, we're going to be putting an int in this value later. All right, so for a right triangle with base, blank, and height, blank. All right, I need to tell Java what to put in these blanks. So in the first blank, I am going to put the value of the variable base. All right, and in the second blank right here, I'm going to put the value for the height. Okay, what the user typed in. All right, let's test that out. All right, so here we can see it says I entered the height of the right triangle as 3, entered the length of the base as 4. It says for a right triangle with base 4 and height. You can see it says 33. The issue with that is that printf doesn't automatically go to the next line. So it printed this message from line 27, and then it printed the height again. You can see it ran it all into one line. So to fix that, put a /n or a %n right here. So now when I run it, that %n or /n will cause it to go to the next line. Okay. All right, and then instead of printing out the height again, I am going to print out some values. The perimeter is blank. Or actually, I guess we should do the hypotenuse first. All right, and the hypotenuse is type double, right? So the placeholder when you're using printf should be %f. So the hypotenuse is blank, comma, the perimeter is blank, and the all right, it's getting a little bit long, right? So I am going to just make it go to the next line so it's easier to read. And the area is blank. And then I'm going to put our %n to make it go to the next line. And then I need to tell Java what to put in those blanks. So I misspelled hypotenuse here. Hypotenuse. All right, and so in the first blank, I'm going to put hypotenuse. In the second blank, I'm going to put perimeter. Right, that's this variable up here. And in the third blank, I'm going to put the area. Okay, let's take a look at that and see if it works. All right, so as a test case, I'm going to use 3 and 4. So in that case, right, the hypotenuse should come out to be 5. All right, And then the area should be 3 plus 4 plus 5, which is 12. And then the area should come out to be 1/2 base times height. So that should be 6, I guess. All right, so let's see what happens when I press enter if those values are correct. All right, so you can see I get this message. For a right triangle with base 4 and height 3, the hypotenuse is 5. So that's the correct value at least. The perimeter is 12, right? That's 3 plus 4 plus 5. And then the area is 6. That's 1/2 base times height. So 1/2, 2 times 4 is 2 times 3 is 6. Okay. And same thing, let's run it one more time and check. We'll do 5, 12, and then we should get 13 on the hypotenuse. So 13. So that looks good. And then 30 on the perimeter. That's 5 plus 12 plus 13. And then 30 would be 1/2 the base times the height. So that would be 6 times 5, which is 30. Okay. All right, so that's looking like it's working pretty well. Just going back and checking and make sure that I did everything. Write a class that asks user to input the height and the base. Yep, I did that. Right. Use a scanner object. I did. Calculate the hypotenuse, perimeter, and area. Yep, did that. The class should display the results to the user rounded to 2 decimal places. So I have not done that. Okay. So the rounding, when you do the rounding, just do it for the double values. Don't do it with the int values because Java's not expecting it to do that. So to round a double, all you have to do is put a decimal point and a 2 in between the percent and the F. Okay, so I'm going to round all of these to 2 decimal places, like so. Right, so now if I do 3, 4, right, you can see now my values are all rounded to 2 decimal places. Okay, and so that is pretty much it on this example.